Celebrated author Roald Dahl's hometown is honouring the man and his vivid imagination with a variety of events, including an array of exhibitions at the Roald Dahl Museum, where people are encouraged to get up close and personal with his work.
I was hearing all the secret whisperings of the world.
Please enter.
Who are you?
He's Willy Wonka.
I'm Violet Beauregard.
I don't care.
I want a group. I love the chocolate.
I can see that.
No more Miss Nice Girl.
A dip face. Have a carrot.
Nah, you eat it.
A plethora of characters, all from one man's imagination. And to celebrate 100 years since Roald Dahl was born, his hometown is pulling out all the stops.
Here at the Roald Dahl Museum and Story Centre, it's all about the stories behind the stories. So Roald Dahl, like most writers, wrote from what he knew, wrote from his own life experiences and then mixed them up like the BFG mixes dreams. It's the fizziness of his language. Even in his letters home to his mother from boarding school, which we have here at the museum, you can see there's that energy, that kind of breathless excitement that's really marvellous about Roald Dahl.
Born in Wales to Norwegian parents, Roald Dahl grew up in the English countryside. It's the backdrop to many of his famous children's stories.
Well. I've got you this time.
So, you're in for it now, my lad. Dangerous driving. Driving without due care and attention.
Ah, Sergeant, the very man I wanted to see.
But it's the characters that have captured children's imaginations for more than half a century. From Willy Wonka to Fantastic Mr. Fox to the big friendly giant. The people populating Dahl's stories are still finding their way onto the big screen. It all started here, in this armchair, which was tucked away in a little shed at the bottom of Roald Dahl's garden. And here, surrounded by a collection of his favourite treasured objects, the writer would use this rather makeshift setup, picking up his desk and a pencil, and to this yellow-lined paper, he would commit the stories that we now know and love across the world. And now, I really feel like Roald Dahl. Dahl had a routine, writing 4 hours a day in 2-hour stints. But he wasn't always a writer. He started his career as a fighter pilot, and his first published work was about a plane crash he suffered in 1940. He had limited success writing for adults, and it wasn't until his children were born that Dahl found fame, with stories he'd invented to tell them at bedtime. His characters speak gobblefunk, and this year visitors to the Roald Dahl Museum can have a whiz-popping time learning to tell a boot boggler from a hornswoggle. Belle Lupton, TRT World, Great Missenden.
From children's stories to tales of the unexpected, it's time to talk about possibly one of the best storytellers of all time. And for that, I'm joined by literature critic and writer Tom Ward. First of all, congratulations on your new book, Dead Dogs and Splintered Hearts. It has just been released and is getting some great reviews. You say you were inspired by Dahl's book for one of the poems. Tell us about it. Has Dahl always been an inspiration?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think every English writer, whatever they write, is inspired by Roald Dahl to some degree. I wrote this poem in my book. I woke up after falling asleep reading his short stories and just had the image of a bag of eyeballs in my head, which must have somehow come from his stories. So I imagined a wife providing this as a present to her husband after she's been away, and the idea just came out of there, really. But I think it was inspired by Roald Dahl's very strange twist of reality.
Some research shows adults read Dahl's children's books even more than the children themselves. Why, as adults, are we so fascinated by his books?
I think because, like Harry Potter now, we've all grown up reading or having Roald Dahl books read to us, so it's part of our childhood, and I think they're a way of escaping from reality, but also understanding it a little bit more. Stories like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory you have a child, he's living in austerity, but he finds a golden ticket, he's chosen, and suddenly things become better for him. And as a child, what you want is to go into a sweet factory. As an adult, you might read that and something else appeals to you. So it's very easy to imagine yourself in these situations. And I think the stories in that way are as relevant to an adult as to a child. And I think that's why they've endured for so long.
Well, Dahl wrote for adults as well as children. In contrast to his children's books, his stories for adults were often dark and brooding. Please compare and describe how they differ.
I think when you look at the start of Roald Dahl's adult short stories, they come from his experiences as a fighter pilot in North Africa in World War II. And his first book, Over to You, is a lot of it's like early Hemingway or J.G. Ballard when in Empire of the Sun talking about war, and it's very straightforward because I think the war is such a big subject that is enough inspiration. But then when he comes back from the war, he becomes a lot more playful, and his short stories for adults take the everyday situation he's in with and just provide a sense of mischief. And I think with children's books, because children have better imaginations and we all lose our imaginations and stop thinking in a certain way, I think Roald Dahl saw it as his mission to really disturb people as children so that they would take these weird images and this different way of thinking with them into adult life. So I think with children's books, he really let his imagination run wild, as we can see. Whereas for adults, I think he tried to disturb them in more subtle ways by looking at everyday aspects of their existence and just finding a slightly macabre twist on that to chill and unnerve us.
Mm-hmm. Well, there was some social criticism, life advice, and even philosophy in his writing. How did he weave these into the stories?
Yeah, I'd agree that there's social criticism in his stories. I mean, in his children's stories, it's much more obvious. You have the twits or the witches who are the bad guys, people like Willy Wonka who are the saviours, and Grandpa Joe are departing all this life advice. In his adult stories, it's less clear-cut, but it's often the people. I mean, if you read a newspaper, it's quite obvious who the villains are that Roald Dahl is referring to. You have people like company directors, you have your boss at work who's a little bit mean to you, you have the guy who's trying to steal your wife, perhaps. So these people are, I'd say, the targets of Roald Dahl's adult work mostly. But often they get their way and they win in the end. And in a lot of his stories, the protagonist who you root for throughout, he doesn't get his way and he ends up in a worse situation. And I think that as well is a subtle life lesson there, that things don't always work out, even if you think you're one of the good guys.
Definitely. Well, Tom, before we go, what are your favourite works by Dahl and why?
I think one that really stands out is Skin, about a artist who's famous in his life and he's died, and a collector thinks he has all of this guy's work, but it turns out that the artist used to live with a tattoo artist, and one evening the artist actually tattooed the tattoo artist's back, and this is his last remaining piece. The problem being it's a living piece, it's on the back of the tattooist who's still alive and well. And in this story, a rich hotelier decides that he can bring this tattoo artist to his hotel, put him up in a life of luxury, and in that way he'll be a walk-in exhibition and testament to the deceased artist's prowess and legacy. But it's only at the very end of the story that you find out that in actuality no one has seen the tattoo artist since he arrived at the hotel, but they do have a brand new painting on display, which is quite unnerving. I also really enjoy his the book Uncle Oswald, and this character was introduced in a lot of short stories where it's a mysterious long-lost relative turns up and he's telling tales of escaping to Egypt. He's meeting mysterious women, he's travelling the globe, he's a typical rake, and this is sort of like Indiana Jones but on steroids in a way, and this really appealed. And I think more than anything, it's Roald Dahl pushing what he can get away with to the maximum and questioning whether you're actually going to like this character or whether you're going to be disturbed by the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Tom Ward, thank you very much for joining us on our Roald Dahl special.